All for being here today. This is a really important moment for our college community. We've been talking for the last year about our shared goal of continuous improvement around student success, student satisfaction, retention, completion, transfer, gainful employment, and our collective desire to really move forward to the next level of excellence, really looking at our data, disaggregating our data, and beginning to work together to set goals for continuous improvement. And together we made the decision to join Achieving the Dream, knowing it's a lot of work and it's a real commitment. And today we really get started. This is our opportunity to meet, for those of you who haven't already, our coaches, our leadership coach and our data coach, and to get started with our work. So this morning I'm going to introduce our coaches, and then they're going to talk with us a bit. They have a few slides discussing the work that we'll be doing together. And then we're going to open it in typical town hall fashion. Although I love this, Heather and Sheila. By the way, I want to do a shout out to Sheila Diane and Heather DeVries. They are co-chairing our dream team, which is co-chairing this entire effort. So thank you. Where are they? They are where? There they are. So they're suggesting that after Mary and Rene speak, we're going to open it to what we're calling fears and cheers, okay? So we want to allay fears about our embarking on this work, but also hear cheers about what Hudson County Community College does well. What does the audience think Mary and Rene need to know about Hudson County Community College, and everything in between. So we'll have a nice conversation. We have until noon if we need it. So let me go ahead and introduce our coaches, and I'll mention, I think you know this, they'll be here throughout today. They'll also be here all of tomorrow morning, I think through lunch, and we'll be attending College Service Day and also speaking there. So first I'd like to introduce our leadership coach, Dr. Mary Fifield. Mary served as president. I'll do the intro and then she served as president at 2 community colleges spanning 20 years. So she's president emerita of Bunker Hill Community College, which is Boston's community college, and prior to that was president of Harrisburg Area Community College, one of the largest multi-campus community colleges in Pennsylvania. She provided stellar leadership at Bunker Hill. She served for 17 years and saw that institution achieve tremendous continuous improvement and success. I think very importantly, and important for our purposes, because we're really also working together around the whole area of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and our focused work together to get to the next level with regard to all things related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. While she was president of each of these community colleges, each college was selected as the national recipient for achievement of equity and opportunity for persons of color and women by the the Association of Community College Trustees, ACCT. She has many years of community college service, which also earlier in her career include experience as academic vice president, dean of instruction, department chair, and faculty member. Her strengths are more, there are more strengths than time will permit me to discuss, but they include institutional transformation, financial management, and strategic planning. And her accomplishments include the creation of highly effective cyclical strategic planning processes, which we will be embarking upon at the end of this year, involving both public and private sector interests in conjunction with faculty, staff, and students. She's a former member of the board and executive committee of the American Association of Community Colleges. Her record of public service, publications, and presentations is extensive. It includes a filmed CNN interview, which aired on Your Money several times. I hate watching that because I always realize how poorly I've performed. She's given testimony before numerous state and federal legislative committees, including representing AACC at the Spellings Commission on the Future of Higher Education. Mary holds a BA from Clark College, an MFA from Pratt Institute, and a PhD from St. Louis University. And she has been working with community colleges of all sizes across the United States as an Achieving the Dream leadership coach. Mary, welcome. We are delighted and honored to be working with you. And Dr. Rene Garcia is professor of psychology and statistics at Miami-Dade College. He has been an ATD leadership data coach since 2006. He's also a mentor for the Association for Institutional Research Courses, a resident faculty member for several community college survey of student engagement institutes, such as the Men of Color, Engaging Latino Students, and Entering Student Success Institutes. He retired from Miami-Dade in 2015 after 38 years of exemplary service there. He was the Director of Enrollment Management for the last 15 years of his tenure, with primary responsibility for coordinating the institution's recruitment and retention efforts. Some of Rene's contributions include the redesign of the recruitment, admission, and intake process for 14,000 direct entry students, and coordination of orientation, advisement, assessment of non-cognitive factors, and an academic plan. And in conjunction with the IT department, Rene developed databases to track students by type and better tools for advisors to provide student information in a clear and accessible format. He was an integral contributor to the development of structured pathways at Miami-Dade College, which I think we all know is one of the preeminent community colleges in the nation. He was the recipient of Miami-Dade's endowed teaching chair, and his extensive experience also comprises test administration and development, research, grant writing, survey construction. He served as a consultant for educational testing service, the College Board, Aspira, and others. And Rene holds a doctorate, MA, and BA in psychology and education from the University of Miami. Rene, welcome to HCCC. We're delighted to have you. And with that, I'm turning this over to Rene and Mary, and after the presentation, fears and cheers. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that really complete introduction. You know, as time goes by, I try to give shorter information to the institutions so that everybody thinks I'm younger, because I couldn't have done anyway. You get the picture, right? So I do have a 45-year career in higher education, in community college education. I'd like to start, though, not by talking about that, but by talking about achieving the dream and why I'm a leadership coach and why I believe so strongly in achieving the dream. When I was president at Bunker Hill, after I'd been president for, 6-7 years, we heard about an organization called Achieving the Dream. I had no idea what it was at the time, and at that time, and this would have been 2007, the only way that a community college could join Achieving the Dream was if your entire state endorsed it. And so at that time, Massachusetts, I was at Bunker Hill Community College in Boston, had not endorsed it. And I remember going to the ACCT, Association of Community College Trustee Conference, where there were leaders connected with Achieving the Dream, and my board chair and I would corral them and say, well, look, what do we have to do to get involved in this? And they would say, well, I'm really sorry, but your state has to endorse it. And finally, Massachusetts did, and they opened up a competitive process to join Achieving the Dream, and they took 4 community colleges. We were one of them, so we were really fortunate and very thrilled to be part of it. But why was it? That's the question. Why is it that we followed around at a national conference the leaders of Achieving the Dream? Why did we care about it? We were in a big city. We had a tremendous number of resources at our disposal, a lot of the most prestigious higher education institutions in the country, a lot of the major business leaders, especially in health fields, were in Boston. It seemed like we had everything. What is it that compelled us to want to be part of Achieving the Dream? Essentially, as president, here's what I saw happening. Little by little, community colleges became more visible in this country, and that's a good thing. So we weren't children of higher education anymore. We became full-fledged members. But along with that came a lot more emphasis on what it is we were or were not doing in the eyes of the public. And so there was a great deal of accountability that all of a sudden community colleges were responsible for to the external world that we hadn't really thought about. And as a result, the federal government began to measure the success of community colleges. And the way they did it was an odd way, at least to my way of thinking. It was something called iPads, post-secondary educational data system. What it did is it measured your full-time, first-time students and how successful they were. Well, at Bunker Hill Community College, we had 14,000 students. Only 500 of them were first-time, full-time students. And so when they reported my graduation rate, which was low, 10, 12, 15%, all of a sudden the entire city of Boston and everybody that supported us financially believed that only 10, 12, 15% of Bunker Hill Community College students were being successful, when it represented only 500 students. That made me angry. But what could I do as an individual? Well, I found Achieving the Dream, and the reason Achieving the Dream was so important is that it is, and you can go on the website, the only non-governmental association that works with community colleges to promote student success and to measure them in many different ways, not just first-time, full-time students. So we became an Achieving the Dream member. We worked with a leadership coach like me and a data coach like Rene, who over at least the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years that I remained in that presidency, were able to increase completion rates, not just for 500 students who were first-time, full-time, but for our student body in general, because that's who our constituency was. I became a really strong believer in the kinds of strategies and the ways in which college communities can work to help students be successful. And as a result, when I retired, I was absolutely thrilled that Achieving the Dream asked me to serve as a leadership coach, to be one of the coaches that go out to colleges and do precisely what coaches did when they came to Bunker Hill Community College. And as a result, I've been coaching now as a leadership coach for this is my 7th year, I think. And this year, I coach 8 colleges across 7 or 8 states. The farthest north is Minnesota. The farthest east is Delaware. The largest now is the Lone Star system in Texas with 80-some thousand students, although at one point I did coach Ivy Tech in Indiana, which is one community college for the entire state of Indiana, 23 campuses and 9 regions. The smallest place I've ever coached was Zanesville Community College in Ohio with 1,800 students. So over the years, I've seen a whole lot, and as has Rene, and we've collected a lot of experiences. What we're going to show you today are the results of many years of coaching, not just for Rene and me, but for the 75 or 80 coaches that work with 277 colleges in the United States right now, who have come together and developed I don't want to say formula, but a framework for assessing the capacity of a community college to be successful. And that's what this little short video is going to show you. But before we do that, I'm going to ask Rene to step up and to introduce himself and say something I haven't.
What she said. And I joined Achieving the Dream before my institution did. And one of the things that I brought back to Miami-Dade was the idea of disaggregating data by certain variables. Because too often we do things in aggregate and you miss a lot of things. And once we did that, we noticed that at least for some students, we weren't as great as we thought we were. And I want to say that a lot of the motivation was prompted by social justice and doing the right thing, but some of it was enlightened self-interest. The state of Florida was moving towards performance-based funding. Taking a page from the business world, we had a segment of the population we were serving that simply wasn't buying enough of our products, quite frankly. I know it sounds a little mercenary, but it was at least part of the motivation. And quite frankly, I was able to steal a lot of ideas from some of the colleges I work with. And hopefully, I'll be able to steal some ideas from you. So we have a little video showing you a little bit of what Mary made a reference to on the ICAT. I think it goes for about 3 minutes, maybe a little less.
As we say, hit it.
What if we could find a way to change the college experience so that all students could be successful? One that improved student outcomes and increased completion.
Please stand by.
For What if we could find a way to change the college experience so that all students could be successful? One that improved student outcomes and increased completion. For over a decade, Achieving the Dream has been working with hundreds of colleges using 5 principles that focused on student success and built a culture of evidence. These principles have been used to inform decision-making and guide improvements in student success. What has evolved from this work is a new capacity-building framework and the Institutional Capacity Assessment Tool, or ICAT. This new model is built on the belief that student success is sustained by a student-focused culture. And a student-focused culture is developed through a holistic approach, one that builds capacity in these 7 areas. Strength across the 7 capacities means colleges are well positioned to adopt large-scale interventions like pathways and integrated planning and advising systems. The ICAT is a self-assessment for institutions that accompanies the capacity framework. It will pinpoint a college's strengths and needs in each of the 7 capacity areas. Our coaching and technical assistance is then tailored to bolster capacity where necessary. Developed from the ground up with input from the field, the ICAT was piloted at Achieving the Dream colleges. The experience has underscored the value of creating a student-centered culture in which all students can thrive. Through the ICAT, Achieving the Dream is enabling the important work of change that supports the success of all our students.
Okay, so that's a little infomercial, if you will, about Achieving the Dream. And I think probably a good place to start is somewhere in the middle of this short video. You saw that Achieving the Dream started with 5 principles. And over time, those 5 principles morphed, but in a very intentional, calculated way, into 7 capacities. And you saw that spin on the wheel, and we're going to put that up and show them again. How did that really happen? Essentially, what happened is that over time, 6 months to a year, all of us that coach community colleges for Achieving the Dream came together, both at retreats and virtually, and subdivided ourselves into teams and distilled the best practices that we learned from other colleges. And what we found after doing this and considering everything we'd learned from, at that time, about 200 plus colleges and from 80 coaches working together, we came up with 7 different categories, if you will. And it was the pretty much unanimous opinion of all the coaches working with all these colleges, community colleges over time, that if an institution, in their own opinion, their own self-assessment, believed that they were pretty prepared in each of these 7 areas, that they were strong in each of these 7 areas, we then concluded that they were pretty well prepared to take on some challenging student success work. If they were not, then they had to work on bolstering one or more of these areas. So that's essentially how that all happened. I'll go into a little bit of what a couple of them mean, and then I'm going to ask Rene to step in and do that as well. Rene, I can't remember which ones I'm taking, so I'm going to start with leadership and vision, and talk about that for a second. When you think about leadership and vision, I think it's natural to think about the president, or at least the top administration. But what we found working with colleges is that those colleges that are best prepared and that are most engaged in student success work are those colleges where the president and the top leadership are secure enough and confident enough and smart enough to realize that the talents connected with leadership exist in each one of us personally, at whatever level of the institution we're at. And so those colleges that have the strongest capacity in leadership and vision are those colleges that are willing to give up at the top leadership levels that responsibility for unilateral leadership and vision to the college community. And that includes all faculty and all staff, and listening to student voices as well. Teaching and learning is an interesting one up here because when Achieving the Dream was founded, it was not one of the 5 guiding principles. And I think the reason it wasn't, even though we all know teaching and learning is at the heart and soul of all of our community colleges, I think the reason it wasn't included in the beginning is because it seemed like a no-brainer. It seemed like, well, of course, teaching and learning are important. Everybody knows they are, but it wasn't explicitly mentioned. And so what happened over time is that we found that when we went out and coached colleges, faculty in particular would say, well, wait a minute. You're talking about what a college needs to be able to really help students and be successful at it, and you don't even have teaching and learning listed. And so we said, well, yeah, but that's implicit. And they said, well, nothing's implicit and nothing's real until it's included there. And so that's why you see teaching and learning. And I should also point out that teaching and learning isn't just what goes on in the classroom. Although obviously that's again the heart and soul of it. Teaching and learning implies everything that we do at our community colleges, again, regardless of what position we're in, that will help students learn how to be students and want to stay, in this case at Hudson, for example. So teaching and learning then is another one of the capacities. Strategy and planning is a third one that I'll talk about. And strategy and planning also was not part of the original 5. But strategy and planning made it to this list because it became apparent pretty quickly that many community colleges, for whatever reason, were not making the connection between their strategic plans and between their accreditation self-studies and their student success work. They saw them as separate. Here's our strategic plan. We have 4 or 5 goals. Here's our Achieving the Dream. We have a couple goals. Here's our capital development plan for the buildings. And we know we're going to build these, but there was no convergence. And so strategy and planning became very important so that we as coaches, when we worked with colleges, talk with you about the extent to which your other plans converge on a student-centered culture. To what extent does your strategic plan, for example, and I know that you're about to begin a new one as you move into the next year, as you move into the next year, but to what extent is the overall goal of your strategic plan consistent with the overall goal of why you joined Achieving the Dream, to help students be successful? And to what extent are your building plans connected with helping students be successful? I coach at one college, I coached, past tense, at one college, for example, and I'll never forget it because the college was beautiful. It had 10 buildings, beautiful grounds. The buildings had marble pillars and hardwood floors. A community college, it was magnificent. And do you know that in that community college, there was not one place for a student to sit and do anything? Not one place. There wasn't a bench outside a classroom. There wasn't a student center. There was not one place. And so that you can see then how something like a capital development plan does have a lot to do with not only strategy and planning, but establishing a student-focused culture. And then the next one I'm going to talk about is equity. And equity was one of the original 5. Equity is kind of an interesting one, and it differs depending upon what part of the country we're coaching in. In some cases, for example, I coached a very small college, and equity, leveling the playing field, giving every student what he or she needs rather than giving all students the same thing. Equity played a big role at one particular institution I coached because they had a very large veteran student population. And again, in the beginning, this institution believed that everybody ought to be treated the same. And what they found is that their veterans obviously had needs that were stopping them from being successful, and they were pretending they didn't exist. The same thing happens in other areas of equity, whether it be ethnic or racial or gender or sexual orientation or whatever it is. The fact of the matter is that to think about treating everybody the same at face value sounds nice, but in the end it becomes a very superficial or kind of naive application. There are colleges I coach at where when I talk about this, invariably somebody raises their hand and says, wait a minute, Dr. Fifield, I just want you to know, stop preaching to us, I just want you to know, I treat all the students the same in my class. No matter what I've said. No matter what I've said. And so it's really been kind of an interesting journey. We have a little diagram, I think a little picture, do we not? I do have an MFA in art from Pratt, but I did not draw this. So I want everybody to know that. but I think, picture is worth 1,000 words. So the question is, how sensitive are we to giving every student and groups of students, and this goes back to Renee's point about disaggregating data. If you don't disaggregate data, you don't know what different student populations need. And so you're forced to treat everybody the same because you have no way to distinguish and no way to determine or identify what particular kinds of experiences will help your students, groups of students, be more successful. I'm going to turn this over to Renee now.
So policies and practices. When I was at Miami-Dade, we had policies and practices on the manual that were dated from the 1970s. And that resulted in 2 issues. One, they're old. And 2, very often it didn't reflect what was actually happening. But even beyond the clerical aspect of reviewing that is a very necessary step if you're interested in student success. I'm going to give you 2 concrete examples. One institution I coached with, which was relatively small, 60% of their students came in the evening, and classes started at 5:40. I'm sure you know the punchline to this. When do you think offices closed? Okay. In fact, in their case, it was at 4 o'clock. So there is an instance where the policy and the procedures are not conducive to having students get what they receive. This example applied to a lot of institutions. And hopefully it applies to you, that way we can tell you not to do it. And that is allowing students to register after classes have started. Every institution that has looked at that has found that students who register after the start of classes don't do nearly as well. We can argue over why that is the case, okay? But that is a pretty consistent finding. That is policies and procedures. And not only that, if we have any faculty here, you absolutely love it when you have a student that comes a week into the semester, don't you? So one of the things you're probably going to be in favor of is, we need to do something. And of course the issue was, but that's unfair, our students have issues. Well, does every class have to start on the same day? And the short answer is, of course not. Okay. Back to some examples. Like Mary referenced, we coach a number of colleges. I think I'm at about 11 or 12. My largest is the same as Mary because we coached that together, is Lone Star with 90,000. I also have a college in South Dakota with a total student population of 285. The two things they always complain about is we are siloed and we have communication issues. And if you're in a large institution, you say, well, we're so large and complex. If you're in a small institution, you go, well, we're so small and inbred. Okay? But the issues are exactly the same. That is why you're going to see us be broken records about a number of things. One of them is engagement, communication. Get stuff out. And a lot of time, communications especially is a lot like getting vaccinated. You need multiple exposures for it to hit. And it's interesting how we always complain about our students when we say, it's in the syllabus, we told them. And yet how often do we need to be told things more than once before it becomes internalized? And I left the last capacity, which is my favorite, data and technology. And that is, again, one of those words we're going to overuse, disaggregate, disaggregate, disaggregate. Because that's how you really know what is going on with your student groups. And I'm going to make a pitch again for using a lot of qualitative data you already have. Qualitative is a word that basically means ask students their opinion. And you guys do something called a community college survey of student engagement, and is full of wonderful stuff that mostly sits on a shelf. So we're going to encourage you to take a look at that. And Mary made a reference to the ICAT, and I want to make a pitch for two things. One, every single one of you should do it. This is your chance. Two, oh, but I don't know anything about filling the blank. Don't skip it. Every item has a choice that says, I don't know. Because, for example, there are going to be questions about what happens in the classroom. And if you're in student services, you may say, I don't know what they do there. Say so. There are going to be questions in leadership that talks about relationships with the board. You say, I don't know, I'm too down the hierarchy to know anything about that. Say so. So participate in taking the ICAT, and as a follow-up to that, we have something called a cafe, which basically means we bring people together, show them the results, ask them 3 questions. What are things you do well? What are the things that need to improve? And what do you think you're going to want to do about those things? So we've tried to impress on the President's Executive Council for Hudson to cast a wide net on both things. So don't make me look bad, and please participate.
So when when you hear from now on, when you hear us talk about ICAT, we're talking about the Institutional Capacity Assessment Tool, which consists of almost 80 questions distributed across these 7 areas and asks you what you think about Hudson. What do you think about the kind of engagement and communication that exists at Hudson? You're not being asked to be an expert about any other place or about communication and engagement generically, but every one of the questions relates to your opinion about any of these 7 areas here. And it may very well be the case, as Rene points out, that you don't know the answers to some of them. And it's important that you say you don't know, because then we can look at how many don't knows there are and see where there needs to be more interaction, more communication, more sharing of information. Typically, when we coach new colleges as Hudson, we ask you to administer the ICAT online sometime between our first and our second visit. Our second visit is scheduled for November 20th, and so we will be asking you between now and then to do that. It's not difficult. It can take an hour if you're really careful. If you're quicker, it can take 45 minutes. It takes some individuals a half hour to do, but it's important. And those results then are sent to our Achieving the Dream headquarters. They come back, and from those results, we'll get a pretty good sense, as you will, because they'll be shared with you, about what all of you, members of the community who know the most about Hudson, not me and Rene, think about Hudson's capacity in these seven areas. Do you want to add to that?
What she said.
Oh, come on. Rene, talk a little bit about the Capacity Cafe, because that's the follow-up to the ICAT, to which all of you will be invited when we're here for our second visit.
We have each of the tables with one of the 7 capacities. And if the group is large enough, you can have multiple tables of the same capacity. The results of the ICAT are there, although hopefully they would have been distributed before. And you'll have a sheet of paper with the 3 questions I referenced. Based on what you've seen on the ICAT, what are strengths, what are things that need to be improved, and how are you going to go ahead and improve on those things. Each table is given a set amount of time to discuss those 3 questions. We are severe taskmasters, so we want to make sure that every table answers all 3 questions.
Yeah, except that this is a good cop, bad cop thing, and Rene is a bad cop, I'm the good cop. And so I'm the song lady of the group.
You know that whoever says that they're good cop, they're not. Then we have several rounds, usually about 3. And then that data is collected, organized only in terms of maybe typing it up and putting the responses from all 3 groups for the same capacity in one document. And then that goes back to the community. And maybe that is a starting point for 2 things. What issues do you want to address? And how are you going to address them? That is really important, because one of your major homework assignments for this first year is an action plan. Okay. And as I told the President's Executive Council earlier today, you are going to want to do this many things. And we're going to yell at you and say, no, do these many things. But the Capacity Cafe can be an excellent starting point.
So I think part of this that's really important, that bears repeating, is that as members of the Hudson community, you want to be sure that if you're going to spend the time taking the survey, and if you're going to spend the time coming to the Capacity Cafe, that that your voice will count for something. And so it's going to be very important to talk about how the results are going to be used. And Rene mentioned certainly the action plan, which is something that you will do by the end of the first year, where you will narrow down the universe of things you want to improve to a very narrow but yet critical 2 or 3 issues. But equally as important, as you begin your new strategic plan, what you learn about yourselves from the ICAT and the Capacity Cafe could very well be incredibly important to the direction of that strategic plan.
Okay, how about a round of applause for
That was totally spontaneous. Thank you.
So now I'm going to do peers and cheers, but basically questions that you may have for our coaches, but also things you think they should know, including things that we celebrate as we move forward with this work. So we open it.
Now, in my class in statistics, when I ask a question, I hear crickets pretty much like we just heard now. And then I go around the room and look for the person that has the expression on their face that says, "Please God, not me." And I pick on them.
All right, but you know, I just read a study as a counterpoint that says one of the least successful ways of helping students learn is to find the student that's afraid to talk and pinpoint that student, and especially works against women.
Contrasting point of view. Now we know who's the good guy and the bad guy.
You know, if you don't have a question, tell us something about Hudson that you want to be sure when we leave here we remember, because that's going to help us be better for you.
Especially something you think nobody else is going to tell us. Nobody says.
I guess I'll start.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm the troublemaker.
Thank you.
Just on do you know how big of an ESL population we have?
Yes,
Okay.
because I had a discussion, I don't know if the gentleman is here precisely on that, who's one of your academic leaders.
Okay.
And at Miami-Dade College, 17% of all our students are ESL.
Okay.
And we have 165,000 students. So ESL is really important for us.
Okay.
And I might add that at Bunker Hill, when I left, I think the percentage of ESL students was maybe a quarter of our students. And then our international student population, which was not necessarily our ESL population, numbered students, I think, from 108 different countries. So one reason we really like being here is because your demographics match not only what we're accustomed to, but what we really like.
Yeah, just to follow that up, in New Jersey, we have 21 community colleges, and our ESL program is one of the largest.
Well, and I'm going to share some of the issues we had with ESL students. Perhaps 2 big ones. One is to truly decide what their intent is. Are you really looking just to learn English so you can survive, maybe get a job? Or do you really want to pursue a college degree in the US? And then related to that is how to deal with a wide spectrum of skills. Because you have folks who are highly educated professionals in their country, and you may have others who, quite frankly, may be borderline literate in their own language. And then in those cases, you don't have transferable skills. You can't say, gee, in English we put the adjective before the noun, because nobody's going to know what the hell an adjective or a noun is.
And just as an added note, the issue that we faced at Bunker Hill in Boston was one of, once an ESL student chose a field or a discipline, how do you help that student learn the language of that field, of that profession? And so we did it through learning communities. We established learning communities that included ESL students and students not involved in ESL, And we specifically focused on the language of whatever the field was, whether it was culinary arts or whatever.
Great. Thank you.
I'm just curious why Sinead wants you to know how many ESL students you have. What's behind the question?
You want me to answer that? Well, because the ESL students, speaking of success and student needs, ESL students, and I think Dr. Rene summed that up. What do our ESL students want to do here? And they make such a big component of our student body. How can we get them to that finish line?
Let me share a little anecdote from Miami-Dade. We crunched some numbers, and we found that a risk factor was a student taking 14 credits in a semester. And we said, what's the magic of 14? It took us a little while to figure out that those were mostly ESL students, because the way our curriculum was structured, we would have 4 3-credit classes in each level, and 2 of those courses had a quote-unquote lab, thereby getting the magic number of 14. And here's the issue that arose. In many respects, you have very vulnerable students with significant life challenges, yet they carried more credits than the non-ESL 18-year-olds sometimes coming out of high school. And that was a question for us to have to grapple.
Yes, you hit it on the head. Our students take 12 credits.
So that was just like we rehearsed it. Thank you.
So, and I think, Dr. Friedman, sorry, Tony, I think we can follow up on more of the background a little later.
It's just a general of sort of why is it important that the coaches know that as a salient fact about the college.
Yeah, that's really an important point, and I thank Eric for bringing that to all of our attention. If we can understand why you're asking a particular question, it'll help us internalize your culture better, and also hopefully help us give you a response that makes more sense.
And to dialogue with Sinead, I have to look through Michelle, and I'm going
Which
to
is a
guess that she's
beautiful
not
image to
going to
look
speak
through.
up, but there's a dimension of this college that she represents that we should probably know about.
So go ahead, Michelle. I think that means you have to introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'm happy that you have an MFA from Pratt. Inside, I was like, yes, for fingers. And I would love for more students and more faculty to come to the gallery and use it as a teaching tool. I work hard to bring object-based learning to the college. Every day we work, and it's an important part of learning. I love object-based learning, and I love what the gallery can do to a class when they come in. You know, they bond in certain ways that even if your subject matter doesn't really relate. And I don't know if this is a question because I was kind of forced, but like I just wanted to say that
It was a pop quiz.
Okay, and I hope I'm passing, but I just want to say that I really appreciate, I would take any advice you could give to make that more of an academic element to the college.
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting things is when you have any discipline and you do something with it that's, how can I put this, off-center. So for example, you teach sociology or history by looking at a particular exhibit, a visual exhibit of art. Or you teach mathematics to culinary arts students by focusing on metric systems. Just a slight off-center twist will sometimes really introduce some way of considering or learning something that will trigger a response in students that will make them want to come back.
Yeah.
And come back for more.
Exactly what she said.
See, that's always a good response with her.
One question I have would be, just what kind of data do you gather and do you analyze when it comes to teaching and learning? And I guess one fear that we as faculty could potentially have is that when it comes to something like assessment or something like that, that we would potentially have people outside of our disciplines telling us which data we should be supplying, and that we wouldn't have kind of control over our disciplines that way.
Yeah. So it's exactly not that. Let me just start there. It's exactly not that. Having started as a faculty member, and Rene still teaching as a faculty member, the last thing that we want is somebody sticking their hand in our classroom, tampering with how we do things, and then by some artificial means telling us whether it's right or not. I mean, that simply doesn't make any sense. The most valuable contribution that we can make to Hudson and to the other colleges that we work with is to be sure that the faculty we work with understand that we're not here to judge or accredit or to monitor or to assess. We're here instead as, I say this, at some colleges it doesn't resonate. Here I think it will. We're here as self-empowering agents. Too many times faculty are the recipients rather than the creators or originators of what works best, really good practices. And in some cases, it's because the administration of an institution or the culture isn't set up in such a way that there is a sense that it's okay to be self-empowered. And that gets back to that leadership and vision question, and the extent to which you, if you're a faculty member, right? You as a faculty member and your colleagues feel self-empowered to look at what you're doing and to determine among your colleagues best practices that you can share with each other. We're not gonna come and tell you what to do. We don't know as well as you do.
Thank you.
Hi, I would love to gain some insight in how, as a faculty member or an academic administrator, how we can help students not to leave the classes and withdraw. We have students in the beginning of the semester, the classes are full, and I will talk about the developmental English side and the English composition 101 side. But a lot of times, we start off with a full class, and then as time goes on, we lose students. And you mentioned something very important before about not treating everyone the same. And I agree that we need to have specific accommodations if students come up with specific issues in their lives to try to help them stay in the classroom. I think it would help us a great deal if we can get insight on how to keep these students in class and to see them finish their classes instead of leaving halfway throughout the semester, because we can save more students and more students will eventually graduate.
Yeah, I think, and this is a bit of a repetition from the earlier session. I think rather than asking the question of what can we do to keep students, we see them dropping off in our class. The question is, what can we do before that first day of class that will get ahead of the game and encourage students to stay? For example, I coached one college, or I coached in one college, that divided students up into buddies in class, where one student took responsibility for the other student and reciprocally, which doubled the chance of that student staying in class. And so there are ways, things that you may not be thinking of now, things that we're not thinking of, but different ways of getting ahead of the game and preempting students leaving for whatever reason. All the research that I've read would suggest that when students don't feel they're part of something, just like us, when we don't feel we're part of something, we're gonna walk out. You know, if I go to a cocktail party and I don't feel part of it, I'm gonna leave. And so the question is, what do you do in the beginning? What do you do in the beginning to create a sense of belonging, whether it's in the classroom or it's the institution? Thank you.
Be preventive, not curative. and ask students, because too often we think we know, and maybe we don't always know. I mean, if you go back several hundred years, everybody knew the Earth was flat. Everybody knew that the Earth was the center of the solar system. Everybody knew that. So I would be, I would begin by asking for the students, and I'm going to make another pitch for the SESI and the SENS. One of the items there says, if you were to withdraw, why would it be? And I think that's the starting point. Now, sometimes students give a politically correct answer, so you do have to go in there and dig, and that is why things like focus groups and interviews are important. But I think the principle is ask the students and kind of take it from there. And once you have something in mind, take it back to the students and see what they have to say. I know we want to make sure that we are not a business, and we're not, but there's certain lessons that maybe we can take. And when a company is rolling out a new product, what happens each time they have a prototype? They take it out to the target population and say, what do you think? Okay. And that's a good lesson to steal. We're not in charge.
Good morning. My name is Jose Lowe. I'm the director of the EOF program. And
Tell us what that means. Is that the economic opportunity?
no, that's the Educational Opportunity Fund program here at the college. And one thing I want you guys to walk away is that, just that, to know that there's an EOF program here at the college. I think earlier we met briefly, and you saw me actually with our students this morning, and I think you mentioned, you hit it right in there when you mentioned preventive, because right now we're bringing almost 40 students into the college before school starts, and to introduce them to the whole process of college, money management, retention, and all those things that is on the research. So our program has been around for 50 years, and we just celebrated 50 years 2 years ago, and we're very happy of the outcome of our program. So some of the things that you mentioned, it's in the research, and we've been working on that. So once again, as you learn about our school, make sure that you read more about our program, and if you need more research on that, we're more happy to get that to you. Thank you.
Sure, and you're in a great position, having students just sit in an informal group, just to say to them, what's the one or two things you really need? What do you think you really need to be really successful here? What is it?
Can I chime in for a minute? You're making me want to tell a brief story about what I saw last week with your summer students. So you invited me to attend the kind of concluding session for new EOF students who've been with you all summer. You and your colleagues have been working as a team with these students. These are probably in many cases what we would call high-risk students.
Yes, they are.
And some of them got up and spoke about what the summer experience meant to them. I wish we had it on tape and could just show it right now, but one gentleman I was really struck by. This student got up and shared with the group that essentially, this is how I'm remembering it, he was pretty much lost without a family, without a support group, wasn't sure what he was going to do to improve his life, he was feeling trapped. And now, at the end of the summer, this is my family. Those students had bonded and had gotten a new sense of, and were clearly, there was a camaraderie there and a support mechanism there, and I was so inspired by it. And I know you're doing this in our EOF program day in and day out. It's probably our model for student success, and I happen to be on one of the governor's working groups right now around student success, and some of them, in fact, Jose's on the same committee, but one of the things that our colleagues across the state are recognizing is the EOF program already, by its very construction and by the culture, seems to have the attributes that we all need to try to use to scale with all of our students, because it's really all about student engagement up front and coaching and mentoring and developing that kind of challenge and support system.
And just caring. I mean, how different is it when you know someone cares about you, whether it's your personal life, whether it's your professional life? In the end, that makes all the difference in the world.
And to add to that, thank you, Dr. Reber, on that. And to add to that, that those 40 students who are right now participating in this program, two-day program, I'm going to answer the question of dropping out. You know, they're going to really be connected. They already know each other. Once again, they didn't know each other yesterday, now they know each other now.
Sure.
So they already have this connection, and that will help assist in the dropout rate and the retention rate in our college.
Hello, Veronica Gerasimo, Student Life and Leadership. I think we have fantastic student engagement on campus. A very hefty event calendar, clubs and organizations, honor societies, and I think even silo-wise, I think we work really well. I mean, I'm the kind of person that will like roll up in your office if I haven't heard back from you via email, but I don't think that silos are too much of an issue from what I've seen. I'm sure other people have other opinions. We also oversee new student orientation, so I'm going to add that question onto our assessment, the withdrawal question, and try to get, so we have 2 more sessions left, so we should be able to get some data from that. But I think something outside of the work that we do is the ever-changing environment around us. High price apartments are going up on every little inch of a space available. You see Chipotle is here, Starbucks is here, we just need a Panera Bread, and what was the other one? Chick-fil-A, and we're pretty much super gentrified. So looking at how that's impacting our students, and obviously, you know, parking, the congestion of our area, and how that will continue to impact the retention of our students and even getting them into our doors in the first place. And if the changing environment around us is going to change our student and how we can engage our new neighbors that are right down the block from us.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about, you mentioned some really concrete things that we could see as you said them, whether it's Chick-fil-A or Chipotle or whatever. I coach one college right now, and let me introduce this a different way to hopefully support what you're saying. I have a college right now that has as one of their major goals in their strategic plan to establish what they call a culture of caring. And every single office at that institution must demonstrate somehow, not just say they care, demonstrate somehow how they show that they care about each other, and they care about students, and they care about their community.
And we see that a lot as well in terms of the customer service. If a student, you hear of a student's issue, question, problem, and even if it may not align exactly with what you know and what you do every day, that each of us take that opportunity to connect with that student, get them in the right hands, maybe stay with them a little bit so we learn that information as we're passing them over to the right hands. And just that, you know, many students that just find their way into my inbox that may not directly have to do with our purview, is that follow-up and that question, and you see them later, hey, how's this turning out? And we see all the time what an impact that makes.
And Joe, in direct answer to your question, and I think we've discussed this before, there's a college in Texas that did a number of things. But one of the things is the faculty there committed to knowing their students' names. And that is very low-tech, very low-cost, but it is not any different that you go to a restaurant and somebody remembers you. And you know, we're who we are. And we're not impressed by that, but yes, we are. And Eric is probably going to yell at me because we've had discussions about, let's not come up with solutions yet. And here I am, I just rolled one out.
But you know, Rene reminded me of something in my personal life. I live in Chicago, I'm from Chicago. I have a favorite restaurant, and when I walk in that door and sit down, they bring me a bottle of San Pellegrino water and a glass with lime and lemon. I don't have to say anything. And I feel like I belong, and it feels really nice. There's another college that I don't coach, but an ATD college that has established a program. It's bigger than a program, but I don't know what else to call it. That they've titled "No Excuses for Poverty," and they really mean it. It's Amarillo College in Texas, and they simply will not accept that a student cannot be successful because he or she is poor. They have full-time caseworkers, social workers on staff. They have a host of ways to be sure that a student doesn't drop out, again, preemptive ahead of time, because he or she does not have enough money to buy groceries.
Hi, I'm Alcia Bachelor, Vice President, Student Government Association here. And just to build on what you just said, we just started our food pantry because we saw the need here for the assistance like that. Just my 2 cents.
I just wanted to say I work in the office with President Reba, and I feel like one of the most basic needs that we have or is to meet for a student is hunger. And under President Reba's leadership, he brought a lot of focus to that. And like she said, I just want to reiterate, I'm just really proud that we have a food pantry now. And with Lisa Doherty and David Clark working hard to, bring it to fruition, we can assist our students because you can't really concentrate if you're hungry. And I think that falls under engagement and communication because it makes a student feel cared about. And that's very important.
It actually, I think, crosses almost all of these areas. It really does. And and again, I want to echo something Rene said. We're giving you examples from some other colleges. You're telling us some really great things you're doing here. We don't want to preempt or suggest solutions because this first year, regardless of what you may know to be true, is a planning year. It's a year to have divergent thinking. It's a year to share perceptions so that by the end of the year, you can come to consensus. And if not consensus, at least common ground on the 2 or 3 major directions that Hudson will take going forward to help students be successful. And it may very well be the case that whatever these 2 or 3 major directions are, they encompass some of what you're already doing, like a food pantry, for example.
And very often you're doing the right thing, but in a small scale. And we're really going to push you guys to do stuff at scale.
That's an excellent point because there are pockets of creativity and innovation and things that really work well, and you know them individually, but the people on either side of you may not know what they are. And this is a year to explore and find out. It's also a year to explore and find out what pet projects don't work. And when those pet projects don't work, you got to swallow hard and let them go.
Whack 'em.
See what I mean by good cop, bad cop?
Weed whacker.
Anything else?
With all due respect, because you can get away with anything. If you say with all due respect, so whack 'em with all due respect.
Hello, my name is Abu Traore and I'm an international student. So I have 2 questions that I want to ask. So the first one is how many international students as me are attending Hudson County Community College and which countries do they usually come from?
Miami-Dade College. Yeah. Miami-Dade College had, when I was still there, 4,500 international students. And quite frankly, that's a decline since 9/11. I'm not going to kid you. And we have students from 245 countries. Now, they are not all international students, okay? And we have a tradition at our graduation that the flag of every student is paraded. And let me tell you, when you have that many students from other countries, it kind of slows down, and then it becomes a competition of who can cheer the loudest. But I'll tell you this, regardless, the flag that gets the most cheers is the United States of America.
And again, you know, I'm 6 years out from Bunker Hill, but when I was there and when I left there, 108 different countries, the largest international population was from China. I doubt that's the case now.
And for us, the number of countries went up the moment the Soviet Union dissolved, because that generated 20 or 30 countries right there. So it used to be the Soviet Union. Now there's, like I said, another 20 or 30.
But I think embedded in that question is this. The reason I loved, and I mean, I don't even know how to express how I felt about being the president at Bunker Hill Community College, was because every single day I saw hundreds, thousands of students that were not like one another, all of whom were contributing to this wonderful Bunker Hill Community College. It's what strikes my heart about being your coach here.
Outside of art. In Jersey City, we see it in the schools, and we see it in, we've done really well in our housing community of having different incomes as opposed to just pushing for low-based community. And I feel like that's something that HCC could kind of do a reflection, like, you know, it'd be nice to have someone who's there for like the students that are moving to and we just we have students like that. I saw it as HCC public school, but it was in houses, like the person side, because, you know, the focus was on, and I'm not saying anything is more important or not, but I just think like that's something that would be nice to, is that as our community grows, it would be great to, you know, incorporate it, you know, higher learning element as well.
And that brought something to mind. We study failure to death. Hardly ever do we study success. Because when you tell me that 70% of the students in one class did not pass, that also means 30% did. And what is there that we can learn from them?
I feel compelled to speak because I am the coordinator of the honors program, so something I just
We heard about you. We heard about you.
I would like to share that we are substantially up in enrollment, and we are currently at 125 honor students enrolled, and there, I want to say over 400 students that are eligible for the honors program. So that means they meet the GPA requirement of 3.5, and they're high achieving in other areas as well. And something I just want to share is that we're envisioning the honors program, so it's not just academics. So we do a lot of engagement, very much engagement focused. We're looking for new ways to get students to volunteer, to engage with the community, and do intrusive advising during the semester. So all students can come to see the advisor, and we have very tight-knit network. So I think that we are improving that as well.
I just have to tell you a quick story about Jenny.
Yeah.
So I'm at new student orientation at North Hudson Center about 3 weeks ago, and there's a lot, I don't like lines, but there was a line of students waiting to come in and get checked and everything. And Jenny was working the line with every student, asking them what they knew about the honors program and what fear they might have around the honors program, and doing that early engagement. And I just want to give her a shout out because that was just a great thing to do.
Yeah, another area to we're working on. I'm the coordinator for learning communities. We have various learning communities at the college. You mentioned them before. Currently, we have learning communities with ESL, developmental English paired with math, college comp paired with intro psychology. So in the near future, I'm working with Dean Van Gogh, and we're looking to expand and offer more learning communities. And I think this will give students an opportunity to be more successful, because with these learning communities comes an academic coach that's present in the class to assist the professor and to help the students. So we're moving in
right direction in that area.
Have you had the opportunity, I don't know how old your learning communities are, but have you had the opportunity to determine the extent to which those students persist and complete, and what challenges they may still face, or are you not that far along yet?
We have, they've been sorry Joe, I'm still, we've had them for just about 20 years on campus. Just about 20 years they've been on campus, and pretty consistently the retention rate is about 10 points above the norm. And we find even in, say, a developmental class, students are outperforming their peers. They're outperforming their peers in the college level course as well, which I think is probably not surprising to you too, but we're also very proud of it here.
Sure, and there goes again a good example of this sense of belonging. I fit here, I belong here, somebody cares about me.
I was actually a part of the learning community when I just started here, and it was actually a great help to me when I just started here, because it was this was my first college experience here in the United States, because I'm actually Jamaican by birth. So it was a really good experience, and it was nice to know that my classmates in my language class, in my comp class, were my classmates in my psychology class. And having the coach there to help with my writing, and because adjusting from the Queen's English to American English was a big challenge.
We don't speak English?
Not really. But
That's the truth.
it was a big help being in the class. So.
Well, I'm Cuban, and allegedly we speak Spanish, but we know we don't.
We are unfortunately out of time. This has been phenomenal, really wonderful. I think, I hope you share my enthusiasm for the opportunity. We welcome Mary and Rene into our community, and we also, we're going to continue to work them. So after lunch, they're going to go to North Hudson, and they're going to get a tour. They're going to do a town hall there, and they'll be with us all day tomorrow, and they'll be speaking at College Service Day. And then we'll be seeing them 2 more times this year, and it's going to be a great relationship. So thank you all, and have a great rest of the day. I look forward to seeing you.
So where are we going to put those cooks?
Well,